I am really excited about our final panel. We've assembled leaders from across the healthcare ecosystem, from major health systems to investors to leading life sciences company, to talk about the absolute frontier of AI technology, AI agents. And at Innovaccer, we didn't develop our autonomous AI agents of care, because it's the cool new technology. We did it with a singular vision in mind, and that's to solve healthcare's most intractable challenges, whether that's barriers to access, fragmented care experiences, or just unsustainable costs. We believe that autonomous AI agents of care, are really our best hope, our best opportunity to make this country healthier while bending the cost curve down. So it's my pleasure to welcome Abhinav Shashank, our CEO, Michael Reagin, CTO of Banner Health, Manthan Shah, a principal at Westbridge, Dr. Howard Landa, CMIO at Adventist Health, and Youssef Idelcaid, head of AI research at Gilead, to the stage for a discussion on AI agents.
So maybe we can sort of really get started with brief introductions of each one. You've been I think one of the most accomplished technical leaders as well as investors, I think in the healthcare space. I think it would be just great to sort of really get I think brief intros to really get us started, and then I have a ton of I think questions that I'll bombard each one of you guys with for sure. So maybe Manthan, we start with you, and then we can sort of go around the table.
Hey everyone, my name is Manthan Shah. I am part of Westbridge Capital. We are an investment fund, and our claim to fame is we are one of the first checks in Innovaccer. So thank you, Abhinav and team, for allowing us to be part of the journey. Through Innovaccer and other engagements, we obviously been spending a lot of time in healthcare, and just so impressed by obviously the kind of entrepreneurs out there today building stuff, and never have been excited than we are today about what healthcare is presenting as an opportunity for investors like us, but obviously for entrepreneurs and everyone in the ecosystem. And just a quick word about Westbridge. We are a US India fund. We manage around $7.5 billion of capital and invest in companies from anywhere from Series A till they go public. So yeah, that's a bit about us.
Hi everyone, it's very bright. It's crazy. Youssef Idelcaid. I work at Gilead since a couple months, and I am leading the AI Research Center for drug development. I have applied mathematics and computing background, and actually I did not start in healthcare. I started in cosmetics, where I spent 10 years. But we did have a lot of, dermatology and, submissions to FDA, so I was very familiar with regulations. And yeah, similar to you, not from investments perspective, but I just cannot express enough how impressed I am by the journey that data analytics and data mining back then, we called it data mining, and then data science, and then AI has made. So I think when I was young, because now I'm almost 43, when you talked about AI, in industry especially, people will look at you, like you're a nerd or a very weird person. So today it's everywhere, and it's just exciting the possibilities we have for humans and for growth. So I'm very excited for this discussion today.
My name is Howard Landa. I'm the CMIO for Adventist Health. We're a 28-hospital system in California, Oregon, and Hawaii. I like the way Michael described it, accidental informaticist. I got started about 30 years ago in this career, and I've held similar positions at Kaiser and Sutter, recently, Alameda Health Systems and Loma Linda. And I've had the opportunity to watch healthcare technology evolve from something that doctors refused to touch, to something that they had to touch, to something that, hey, this might actually be useful. And I think that the promise of AI really is in that burden reduction, in that delivery of data, all the data that we have, and making it manageable, making it impactful, making it digestible. And I think it really is an exciting time to be in this field. So excited to talk to you all about this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Reagin, Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President at Banner Health. I'm kind of responsible for kind of all things tech at Banner, kind of traditional IT, digital, data, AI, and innovation, kind of our investment arm that kind of looks at new technologies and advanced technologies. I'm super excited to be with a great group today. I think this is going to be a great talk. You know, I've been in healthcare about 25 years with mainly provider and payer organizations through that life cycle, trying to kind of be at the leading edge of technology through all those kind of organizations. And you know, when I started in healthcare 20 years ago, people used to say, healthcare technology is so bad, it's so behind. And now it's 25 years later and I'm saying the same thing. And so I'm excited because it feels like for the first time in my career, we really have the technology to really solve some of the really complex problems of healthcare. And we're actively doing that, and I think it's going to be a great time, but I think it's also going to be a very disruptive time.
Perfect. So maybe we sort of really get started with a little bit of the context on where we are, like I think on healthcare, and then I'd love each one of you to basically talk through basically components of how do we sort of really solve for the mess that we are in. Last few years, I just feel have been like I think financially very, very challenging, like for healthcare organizations. We are in a time frame where like I think the populations are aging, the inflation on like healthcare therefore is basically going to increase, the cost structure is basically going to increase. Medicare and Medicaid say that they don't have any more money to basically like I think pay. The amount of care that we have to deliver is basically like increasing on a day-to-day like basis. We've also had basically fundamental problems in profitability at like almost every healthcare delivery organization that we're really looking at. The 2% margins that we were sort of really making as an industry, like if tariff basically like I think increases like the cost of consumables and goods effectively, like I think probably that vanishes away as well. And so like we are in a little bit of a precarious situation, like if you looked at like the entire thematic like of healthcare, that the costs have increased, the burden or the demand is not like I think like decreasing, and there is no more money to basically like be had to really serve these populations to the degree that we sort of really all deserve and hope for, like I think given that the country spends like $4.5 trillion like in healthcare, right? So that's like sort of for me like just outside in like the state of affairs, right? Like outcomes are already struggling in a system which is massively overloaded. The load is going to increase. There is no more money. How do we basically solve this is sort of like, I think like the problem statement of AI in some way, like is how I sort of really see it, right? So maybe like I think we sort of really get started with like Harvard, like I think like you've sort of really done some of these like use cases in general. How do you think like we approach this problem systemically? Like there is a bunch of like entrepreneurs here, like people who are really, really focused on building technology and building what could be the future of technology. How do you think like we approach the problem statement as an entrepreneurial group, and how do we sort of really just think about this?
I mean, I think when you think of AI, I'm always torn between thinking of AI as a unique thing and just another technology that we really need to manage, to govern, to deliver. And I always want to come back to that because we're always asking, what is the return on investment? These things are not inexpensive. There's a lot of change management that goes into making sure that it's going to work for clinicians. It's going to be safe, unbiased, all of those pieces. So I come back to that very basic, what's the return on investment? And to your point, we're spending a lot of money. We have healthcare that is not as good as other countries that spend a lot less, although we have choice, we have other things that they don't have. But how do we turn this technology into something that actually provides improvement in care, reduction in burden, so we can get more people into the field without wanting to leave, as we're seeing a lot, and also really delivers to the patients tools that they can participate in their own care. You know, we've gone from customer engagement where we gave you, online access to be able to find out where we are, to engagement around, talk to your physician, see your results. And we're trying to get to empowerment where it's a collaborative relationship with our patients. And I think healthcare has the opportunity to leverage AI to really increase that relationship and empower people, because we don't have enough physicians, we don't have enough clinicians to really participate in their own care and help deliver health as opposed to health care.
Right. And generally, like I think, Michael, like I think, like from your standpoint, like as Howard sort of really pointed out, as you think about like the future of technology, like the last 10 years, like the US probably spent like $250 billion or more trying to digitize healthcare. Like let's say, like I think, like the last 15 years or so, right? And we are probably like the only industry, like by far, where like I think application of technology led to worse outcomes. This is no industry like where this has sort of really happened. Like we spend $250 billion, everyone is sicker, everyone is basically like we're spending more money, and still like I think like nowhere in the vicinity of like actually improving the kind of outcomes that we all sort of really aspire for. A large part of that is basically like no interoperability, information basically like I think like blockages, and infrastructure was not really built, and workflows were sort of really built like I think like first, and then we thought of like I think foundational information infrastructure later, right? So as you think about like I think the next generation of technology and as AI capabilities sort of really like I think like come through, how do you sort of really think about like the architectural approaches people should really be taking, the things like health systems should be thinking about right now, and so that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we did like in technology version 1.0 in some way?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think this is such a fast-moving field. We were putting together a pretty sophisticated AI strategy, I think, back in latter last year, and DeepSeek comes out of nowhere, and you're like questioning all your paradigms, right? And so a couple things I think are true. One, I think the rules of technology are changing. I think they have changed with the advent of AI, and I don't think what the approach to healthcare technology that got us here to where we're at today can get us to the next phase. And I think, I like what Satya Nadella said, that every company is a software company.
Right.
I believe that we all are going to have to take a little bit more direct responsibility for developing that software, that process internally to our own organizations that really makes us to that next level of efficiency, that allows us to be competitive, that really gives us the edge. And, probably not have as much dependency on just taking something off the shelf as is and saying that's good enough. Right. And so, as I think about entrepreneurs of the future, like how can you assist in those type of things it's about open systems. It's about standard infrastructure. It's about using kind of building blocks that can collaborate and work together. I think now more than ever, our infrastructure and kind of our foundation is so important. Right. And I think we have to build it in a way that's elastic to allow us to grow. And I think when you're laying out the problem in healthcare, I think we're all betting on growth. We're all betting on how can we turn the corner by growing our organizations, providing better healthcare, more services, better things to the patients, the members that we serve. And so when I think about that, you need to have that solid foundation there. And it's got to be, based upon kind of core principles of, kind of where AI is going to be. And what I would say is that the first thing you need to do is clean up your data. Right. And so there's a huge investment, I think, in healthcare that needs to be to cleansing that data. It's not good enough just to say it's in the EHR or it's there, but we got to really get to a point to make it usable. At Banner, we've kind of invested in, kind of next generation data platform to really kind of hone this. It doesn't mean you're going to throw away your applications you have. It doesn't mean you're not going to use them. They're still very important in this kind of thing, but I think the way you interface them is going to change. Right. We're going to be seeing a lot more, getting rid of the keyboard and a lot more our clinicians looking eyes directly with the patient and having the technology around them to kind of assist them rather than them kind of managing the technology every second of the engagement. So we put a pretty audacious goal together to reduce administrative burden of all of our clinical staff, including all physicians, by 50% in the next 5 years.
50%?
50%. And we actually think that's low. We think that we should be going for higher than that. We commonly say we don't want a keyboard in 5 years, no keyboard. And so that's beyond, the AI scribes and the note taking, but we've got to eliminate those things to bring back the joy in medicine and the joy in clinical work for our nurses, for our frontline clinicians, and we are committed to kind of doing that. But that takes, a different kind of blowing up the model and disrupting yourself. And so I don't have all the answers to that yet, but I think with the tech we're seeing, we really want to start automating process in an extreme way to get rid of some of that administrative overhead,
Right.
And so I would say there's a lot to unpack with the infrastructure side, but I think that's really key and foundational. Expandable, scalable, cloud-based, clean data, interoperable.
Makes sense. That was great. Youssef, maybe I think we'll get to the money last. But I think as you sort of really think about how care is basically delivered, we've sort of created an ecosystem or a process of being siloed. Pharma is its own entity, payer is its own entity, providers are its own entity, and the hospital probably is its own entity, the primary care group is its own entity. And I think given all of these silos, just these things basically working in collaboration and humming is probably one of the biggest opportunities that we sort of really have. We talked about the prior auths, I think process, it's a friction point that's sort of really there, but you can pick up any two basically points in these organizations pharma, provider, payer, and basically I think primary care, or I think even the government. There is friction that sort of really exists at the edges of each one of these things, right? And as you guys basically think about these things, from a pharma perspective, and is there a collaborative synergy that basically AI unlocks? How do you sort of really think about that? What's the promise there?
A big promise, but I don't know if it translates, really to something concrete on the ground. But this is a question actually that brings me to my last role as the head of data science and AI for commercial, government affairs, and also medical affairs. So I think AI has the promise to connect the dots for patients. Mm-hmm. One of the surprising things for me, coming from other industries, when first I started in biopharma and biotech 4 years ago, is that when a patient make a call to an entity in this healthcare ecosystem, and if they call again, they have to answer the same questions, which means people who are in charge, of engaging with the patients and provide access and care, they don't have a shared platform for the information to make sure that, we have a seamless process to engage with the patients. And I think when we think about AI, it's just an orchestrator where basically you can use techniques like recommender engines, that Netflix is using. And I think coming from retail, the first thing that I was thinking of is, what if we have a Netflix of healthcare? What if I predict where the white space and need and unmet needs for patients in given location? What if I engage with patients where they are? And I think Michael Hung talked about we need to meet patients where they are. I think leveraging that clean data, even if it's not clean, unfortunately, we have also this lag in the data when you talk about claims and other exotic data in healthcare. There are actually opportunities and promise to predict who's in need, actually. And you can reach out to them through the channels that they prefer. And do that in such way that it's proactive, it's two-way, not just a push. And it's valid actually for healthcare providers, because if you just keep calling them to sell your drug or tell them how efficient or your efficacy is good, they don't have time because they are not technology savvy. They don't have time to engage with technology. So there is this notion of engaging proactively, which means do a little bit of push and pull using this recommender engines. That's one. And the other thing that I have seen as an evolution is the burden that you talked about. Because I think, doctors engage with patients, customer engagement specialists like, salespeople or MSLs, they would like to engage. But the thing is, they don't have the information in one place. Mm-hmm. So one of the opportunities I see, it's with agentic AI or agentic workflows where basically, if you don't have time or you need an assistant to kind of, chew the information for you before you digest it, it's a great opportunity. I think, when you're in an appointment with the patients and you're just basically having an assistant that is listening to the conversation and another agent basically that is transcripting and another one that is extracting the right information about the care you need to provide and when you need to provide it. And even, providing a plan, an action plan for the patients, it's tremendous, it's wonderful. It might seem like a romantic, but it is happening. And I think this is the only way actually to make AI work in a tangible way. And I'm sure we're gonna talk about the downfalls as well and the risks, but I think this is a wonderful opportunity we have today. It's moving from the static definition of AI that actually makes that divide even more profound, because there are the AI and generative AI people and the normal people who don't know anything about it. But the agents bring that experience in a much more realistic, proactive, dynamic, and human way. Mm-hmm. Because the human in the loop is real. And if you have I tell my data scientists, basically, you complain about data engineering and maybe software engineering sometimes because you don't have the right support. Well, I give you, 4 agents, and one that is helping you code, one that is helping you curate your data, and you are more proactive, more efficient that way. So I think that's the trend they see, and I think we're gonna hear a lot about agents in the future. And if it can help connect the 360 view for patients, I think that's amazing. Because, especially in the US, I'm from France, it surprised me that certain areas in the US don't get access to care. And sometimes it's, as simple as they don't have transportation.
$4.5 trillion.
Yeah, and I think this is crazy. And the burden you spoke about, was reading 3.5 to 5% of the US GDP goes where? Can you guess? Documentation. I mean, if you cannot generate document, if you cannot medical write, and if you cannot summarize your notes, if you cannot basically send automatically certain recommendations to patients, I mean, what are we doing here? So that's where the economy is suffering. And I think last I would say is something that is really close to my heart, which is, coming from also, I was born in Morocco, and access to care is very expensive, right? And I think in the US it's even worse. I think one of the things I love about AI and recommender engines is just give me my options as patients when I'm diagnosed with cancer or rare disease. If you recommend to me the cheapest or the best outcome for me, I think that's a great use of AI. But again, I'm looking at you, I'm talking about data, and we have to fix data first. But I think it is possible. Even with 80%, 70% clean data, you can do magic. Yep. And we need money, I think.
Yeah. So now to the money, right? So Manthan, I think you guys have been looking at healthcare extensively. I think healthcare IT has probably been one of the worst performing, I think, venture assets effectively for the last 10 years. I also think, for the next 10 years, it's going to be the best performing tech, asset, because effectively we did not have any technical innovation basically driven by startups because of I think everything being logged, and the Cures Act opening up I think the data and a bunch of things that have sort of really happened on the technological evolution on AI. I just feel the opportunity, the 5% administrative burden I think of US GDP opportunity that is exposed I think in front of from an AI perspective is very, very large. So as you guys are basically thinking about investing in founders and how things that they're sort of really building, what's your macro sense of what you're seeing in the market? How are you sort of really thinking about the next generation technology frameworks? How are you assessing the industry, and what have been learnings from your vantage point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Great question, Abhinav. I think to just contextualize what you were saying, right? For example, if we look at the total administrative expenses, like $1 trillion plus, right? The total software revenue put together for every company out there is $250 billion, right? So just the massive opportunity, if people were to start unlocking this using AI and software, is just tremendous. There is no big healthcare IT company who's like $500 billion market cap or even $1 trillion market cap. What's the reason for that? Lots of inefficiencies and lack of interoperability and lack of clean data, a lot of reasons, right? I think what is for us, and I completely agree with you, the next 10 years are going to be fantastic for healthcare and healthcare software and healthcare AI. I think there are 2 or 3 things practitioners are just very, very focused on in our interactions with them, and that will unlock this opportunity. I think one is people are done with siloed systems. People are done with systems who are not taking a platform-first approach. Mm-hmm. It has to be that. It has to be a place where you are able to connect and meaningfully across the entire care continuum, trying to figure out where sort of this data should be going, where should this workflow leading to, and so on and so forth. So that interoperability point is just very, very important. I think number 2, it's not about workflows as much as it is about the outcome. I think people are very focused on, okay, we'll build this workflow and then something will happen. I don't think people are talking about that. People want to see outcome, right? So I think in absence of that, it's just going to lead to, as an entrepreneur, you're not getting the sort of time with any of the practitioners, and also the technology not delivering to the promise it has. And the third point I would say is, I think people are looking for quick ROI, and it's not where it's going to be an 18-month implementation cycle. We'll see after 18 months if the technology
average EHR implementation is 6 years.
Exactly. And we were just talking about this, and for everyone, without naming names, one of the big health systems 20 years ago implemented EHR, spent $4 billion. The software vendor only got like 10% of it. Why? Because there were like tons and tons of implementation which is going on, and 6 years on an average, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't think we have the patience or technology has time to wait for that much. So I think quick ROI as an entrepreneur, if you're talking to Banner, if you're talking to big health systems, you have to think about how can you prove that this is outcome-oriented, interoperable, quick ROI system. And then if that works, I think people are very hungry, and there's a very, very aggressive pull from the market and not a push anymore. So I think that excites us, and that's sort of those are the frameworks we are thinking about when we look at a young, exciting company.
So all the entrepreneurs in the room, like I think, like hit them up, like I think, but only if you have outcomes that you have delivered. Like, let's come back to, like I think we've talked about, like I think, the positives. Like I think we've talked about like all of what is like the possibility set, like how should we basically be thinking about like the technological architecture, but there are inherent risks of automating. Like I think like someone sort of like said in the last panel that let's not like automate chaos, right? And because you could supercharge it, and like then we are like in deeper mess, right? So as you guys basically like think about risks and therefore governance, right? Like, what does it like mean? Like, do you want the government to come and like regulate this? Like, do you want like your systems to basically set up like the right governance framework? Like, the last time basically this happened, like I think like the government said like I am going to define like the software spec on which like everything is basically going to be built. I don't think that worked out really well. Right, like so how do you sort of really think, like I think like this generation of technology, how do we think about governance first? Risks and both governance like would be great. Like, and I'd just open it up like to all of you, like whoever wants to go first.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think some of the frameworks out there are really good kind of starting points for this. I would say that when we're talking about the risks of AI, the transparency and how the AI works is so important.
Right.
And so when we look for, like, when we're selecting AI and we're going after and evaluating something, can we transparently see how the model works? And can we kind of get a baseline for that so we can measure it, not only the performance today, but the performance as we continue to use it in the future, because things are going to change. There's going to be updates, there's going to be things, and how do we judge the performance of that model? So I think that's very important. In our own homegrown kind of AI platform we call BannerWise. We cite every source in every type of large language model, how we got to the answer. We have full kind of transparency. So it doesn't matter if it's a administrative person, a clinical person, where do we get this data? How do we come by it? And we're really trying to use AI to make AI even safer, adversarial nets, everything else like that. So I think that's important. The other thing I think is important is I feel like as an industry, we could go down a wrong path with AI. Right. If we all kind of adopt buy a bunch of agents out of the box, and we have the agent on top of this, agent on top of this, agent on top of this, and it's going to end up being like in the early days of EHRs where we had 20 different EHRs out there, and none of them talked to each other, and none of them had the same consistent standards. So I think an agentic framework where you're thinking about orchestration up front is so important, and that single-use AI agents seem to work well in that framework today. But as in you get multi-use AI agents, it's a lot more complex to orchestrate this. And I think that's something as an industry we need to solve for. That's what I push for the open systems approach and standard infrastructure, because I don't think we can outsource that to our software vendors. I think we have to own that inside.
Right.
Yeah, I love the idea of that, knowing the source. Knowing the data provenance is critical. I've worked in a couple large healthcare systems, and they have over 1,000 applications concurrently running. And you've got data in all those applications, and what is the source of truth? Right. And what is the source that clinicians use to actually care for people? So putting all that together, trying to figure out if you're looking at something that is being presented to you with an AI agent, what is true? What is accurate? And if you're asking a tool to summarize a patient's chart, right, if you can't go back and figure out where did that come from, then either you can't rely on it at all, or you're going to spend all of your time you look at this here, and then you're going to have to go back and validate everything else. So I think we need to have that source. We also need to have it so validated that it is an incredibly low risk of hallucination or bad data being presented. Because when you get even to a couple of percent, we can't rely on that to treat people. And as clinicians, we are terrible at looking at a large amass of data and information and saying, yeah, that's okay. We're good at pattern recognition. Right. Tools are good at bringing all this together. But physicians, even looking at notes they've dictated, routinely have errors because they're not looking at every word. And you can read a note that you dictated, and you see the word you dictated, even though the word in that chart is not the correct word. So it's very hard as an augmented intelligence agent to validate all of that. So we need that. We need the way to confirm it. We also need that accuracy up front. And having to your point, a single AI agent looking at a single system is one thing. Now we're asking, even if that single AI agent is looking at multiple sources, how does it differentiate whether these data points are correct? You've got different data points coming from different systems that has gone through a physician's mind or a nurse's mind, and they have made changes, and it finally gets delivered to the core system that we use to care for patients. But there's also all that data behind it. As you said, there's a lot of dirty data. And how do we evaluate that? So I think looking at it from a governance perspective, primum non nocere, first do no harm. We have to make sure that whatever we deliver first is safe and is quality, and then making sure we reduce burden, we increase the benefits and the outcomes that we're looking for.
I would just add 2 quick points. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just 2 quick points. I think the trust factor is going to be super important. And I think the company which makes that a very important sort of part of their philosophy, how they design the AI architecture, as in telling you if there is even a 0.01% of lack of trust, just showing that and let the clinicians make the decision of if this should even be projected forward to the patients or not. Right. So making sure it's very transparent, very trustworthy is going to be super important, is one thing we have consistently heard. And I think where there is risk, there lies the opportunity. And we are very, very sure and very confident about this, that it's going to be a vertically focused company like Innovaccer, like companies who understand healthcare to that sort of deepest level, who are going to solve this problem. So it's exciting for entrepreneurs who are starting in healthcare, but I think that's where the opportunities, where the risk is as well, where you have to be super focused on healthcare, build that trust, try to figure out where you can very confidently cite the resources, say that this actually works, or this is the place where I'm not confident, I want a human in the loop to take care of this. And that's where I think as an industry, everyone together, the sort of buyers, the sellers will sort of then take this forward.
You stole my answer. I wanted to say exactly the same thing. So I was looking at the audience. So there is a friend of mine here that always works with me. He's from Links Analytics. And it's exactly what you said. So at that time, we were applying this in retail and given a forecast, right? I'm talking about another industry to inspire the audience. Forecasters who are working to put garments in stores,
Right.
And who worked 30 years in retail, don't come with an ML model to tell them, how much you should be, ordering, basically, and making in Morocco or Thailand or India, because they know, they have the magic. The only way to make them believe, basically, on the black box is to create the tiering, right? Like if the model gets it very wrong, then, it's red. If it's a medium risk for them, if you're not too sure, accuracy is so-so, it's orange. If you're very confident, it's green. Even better, something that you said, human oversight. I think one thing that I was, reading, and we're trying to implement actually at Gilead at the enterprise level, is the ability for people in clinical development who are designing trials, people who are basically managing the operations in ClinOps, because there is a lot of forecasting there as well. We forecast enrollment, we reforecast enrollment, we predict the outcome of the trial before we go into the trial, is to override. And I think that's, maybe it's not in the First Amendment, but it should be somehow, like it's a right for you as a user, as a practitioner, as, investor even, to just override what the agent is saying. Because the agents, while they provide this, dynamic way of providing the insights and answering questions, there are still, input-output kind of systems, right? The only difference between a static system is that the agent is making decision on its own. It's different from rule-based, LLMs or, chat, because it's very static. Say, hey, like, how can I celebrate in a good way my 5-year-old, birthday? Then you get an answer. That's it. If you want another answer, you have to reiterate your prompt again and again and again. Anyways, I think I just want to mention that this is not an easy industry. And I worked in 3 industries.
Yes.
Food industry,
That is the
cosmetics, and fashion. And I can tell you, this is the 4th industry, actually. So I told you I'm 43 years old, so I'm not that young anymore. So the WHO last year classified healthcare and use of agents or AI overall in healthcare as the most risky kind of use. That's in our domain. So of course there is also like weaponization and war, but I think because we at scale, I think we take more pills or painkillers than there are wars in the world. Of course the damage can be equivalent, but I think it's just showing you that when you ingest something to a human, that's nothing but a care plan. Imagine an agent who is making automatically and deciding for a practitioner what the plan is, and there is absolutely no human touch and review. You can imagine drug-to-drug interactions and stuff like that. If you have allergies, 911 direct, right? So that's one. And I think in terms of governance, I think, okay, I told you I'm French, I'm from Europe, so I don't like too much governance. But there is a middle ground, right? Because we should not hinder.
Europe, you don't like.
I'm not saying that because I'm sitting next to an investor, but they like innovation, they like to see the industry moving. But I think there is a middle ground. I think the US is lagging, to be honest. I think there are, a little bit of regulations. It's a piecemeal kind of approach. And I know because I'm in a AI governance group at Gilead, and we struggled so much to fit to a framework. So we ended up picking one, so I'm not going to tell you which one because we're going to publish soon. But all we had to do and all we could do is to publish AI principles on our website to make sure that, in case of audit, so we have some sort of plan against harm. We have a plan for fairness, and we have a plan for inclusion. because that bias is still there. Even if you have like the top tier of AI right now, which is, agents, it's not even AGI, you have to be prepared. And I think by 2026, I think Europe is coming. I think with the AI Act, they will start basically executing upon it. And in the US, we are still here. I think it's really a call to action to make sure that we need to adhere to something at the federal level, not too strong, not too weak, but we need a response. Because in healthcare, the problem might be very, very serious. And we're talking about lives, and we're talking about non-inclusive clinical trials. Because I think if something that, as people of color, agents can do for me, it's to match the right patients with the right clinical trial. Because agents are really good in doing that and suggest which population to treat. So we need to make sure that we don't exclude also people from benefiting from what the trial can do. And I think agents and any technology, actually not just agents, who can dig into the data to bring that to life and have some sort of equity in getting access to care, I think that's for me the ultimate goal. To be honest with you, because I don't want US to become Europe because we don't pay for healthcare, but I think at least some sort of justice. It's definitely the ultimate goal for me. If agents can get there, in addition to reducing burden and bringing some effectiveness and productivity, for me it's thumbs up, and then I can return to Europe. But don't say that to my boss.
So I know we're limited on time. Like I think I could go on this basically forever, given all of the work that you guys are sort of really doing. Like we've talked about I think the pain in the system. We've talked about a few solves. We've talked about the foundational frameworks that are sort of really required. We've talked about I think collaborative synergies that could sort of really happen. We've talked about how investors are sort of really thinking about it. We've now also talked about the governance frameworks. Based on I think all of these themes, what is I think your advice to entrepreneurs more generally? This is basically an entrepreneurial crowd. I think everyone really wants to understand where they should be spending time. We're sitting at the heartland of I think most innovation in the country, especially I think AI-driven innovation. If there was basically advice that each one of you had for entrepreneurs on how do you basically think about things when they come to you, what do they basically I think come to you with, how should or not, right? I think those are things that would be helpful for the audience to sort of really and go through for sure.
I'll give a start. Relative to AI and emerging technologies from a clinical side, I look at three areas. One was touched on around burden reduction and how we improve the clinician experience. Another one was also discussed around the quality of our data, how we take the data to make better decisions. We heard earlier about including precision genomics in decision-making around medication choice. The one that I haven't seen as much interested in, that is from my perspective, is AI agents delivered to our patients. And I think, and again, I mentioned patient empowerment. If you go into your AI of choice, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you like to use, and you put in, I have these health conditions, and my doctor suggests I change my behaviors around eating, around medications I take, exercise, any of those things, you can get a very nice summary of, oh, you know what, you want to lose weight and control your cholesterol, here's some dietary suggestions, here's some exercise suggestions, very superficial. But we know that only 10 or 20% of health is related to healthcare. Right. And a good third of it is related to your genetics, and unless you picked your parents really well, you can't do much about that. But half of it is about behavior, and we have been, as clinicians, complete failures at changing people's behavior. We say go lose weight. We say go eat. Here's a page. Eat based off this diet, and no one does it. If we could have an agent that actually could incorporate your preferences, your social drivers of health, your opportunities, where you live and what you have access to, and your clinical data to create a behavioral health plan that you actually buy into because you help create it, and it's all your personal preferences. I think we can do more with an agent in that space than anything we can do other than reducing burden for clinicians, because that is always my first thought. But I think on the patient side, I think it's an untapped area.
Makes sense.
I think we're in an interesting time in AI, and I feel like we're at this precipice of having unlimited context windows, which is really going to change the reasoning power of AI to almost be able to solve any problem. And so I feel like in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to have another leap forward that's going to get us away from the algorithm underlying it, because it's going to become an economic decision at that point. It's like, do I go to a commercial large language model and reason something with a really high cost, and as that even gets more monetized, probably higher cost, or do I have something local that is, you know, more purpose-built for solving some of these problems? So I think, you know, as entrepreneurs, my advice would be is, you know, we have a real problem right now with data, with the cleanliness and the management and how we kind of organize our data. It's not like a platform like you need to come in and kind of redesign like where the data sits and, you know, what the model is, but cleansing the data is a real issue in getting prepared for AI. I think the frameworks around there, how to orchestrate AI, another challenging problem in healthcare. I would focus less on kind of the algorithm development, because I feel like that's
Inference is probably
it's going to be in 18 months. It's going to be something different, I think. And so, you know, those tools that help organizations solve problems like teaching people how to fish are going to be insanely important, and I think they're just going to be really valuable in the future, because we have, I mean, in healthcare organizations, we talk about the clinical problem stuff, but there's a million problems that are not clinical. I mean, having huge workforces and HR, having, you know, supply chain challenges, you know, just, I think about all the diversification.
Revenue cycle.
Yeah, it's just, you know, if we were to solve the administrative cost side of healthcare, we wouldn't be expensive in the United States.
Right.
But I would have to say that we are the kind of gold standard when it comes to kind of like what we put into the clinical side, the research, the stuff. The innovation does come out of here, and I feel strongly, having kind of worked in international healthcare, that, you know, we have all the right ingredients. We just need to kind of fix the problem here. And so it's kind of like we've been at that for a while. Hopefully this kind of, we turn the corner. I think in the entrepreneurial thing, getting rid of that administrative overhead, that's going to be job number one for all of us in healthcare. So if you can automate those things to take that away, the cognitive burden that our people have in medicine and nursing, it's unwinnable today. I feel like we asked them to do way too much. And if we can kind of reduce that so they can actually focus on the patient, focus on what they're doing, and use all that brain power there, it's going to be a game changer for U.S. healthcare. And so I think that's my optimistic view of the world. But that's the advice I give.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I'm not in a position to give advice to entrepreneurs. I think if they are entrepreneurs, like they're way more savvy, I think. But as an industrial practitioner and a client, hopefully in the future, I think just pick one problem at a time to solve. Don't have 10 or even 2 or 3, just one. And I think in clinical development or drug development, you know, my current area, there is a lot of white space and waste, you know, before to go to your, you know, FDA submission. I think there's a lot of opportunities. Like if you just have a startup that is focusing on content automation and generation, you know, you got your moonshot, $1 billion business. I think HIV, which is, you know, we're number one in HIV and virology. I think when I talk to portfolio management people, they're telling me something. FDA tells you what they need. It's not about the molecule or the compound you discover. Once you have it, the rest, it's obvious. It's just time. You need to go fast to submit. But they told me where they, waste time. Take you 6 months here to write a protocol. It takes you another 6 months to write the study report. It takes you, another 6 months to have an SOP, like for a clinical trial. So it's a lot of white space. And really shrinking that, combined with, things that are more related to forecasting, you have one area really to make clinical trials more optimal, and you win.
Right.
Because I think, to your point, technology is here. Of course, you're gonna do like what MIT did, like from 6 years to maybe 30 months to discover like a new compound. But I think it's not that. We don't need like millions of them. As they say, you can discover like millions in 1 hour. It's not the problem. I think the problem is once you have it, it still takes ages to go to put this drug in the hands, of patients. And I think this is where, really startups pick one thing to do at a time, one problem to solve.
Great advices. I think just quick two things. One very high level advice could be, and generic but very true for healthcare, is thrive for excellence and build trust. I think there is no shortcut in this industry and you'll be rewarded massively. And more tactical advice I would say is go for the low hanging fruits but follow the money, I would say, because clearly obviously the amount of risk involved is very high, so you should not go after some of the maybe necessarily the hardest problems to solve for AI. So maybe go after, there are lots of low-hanging fruits, but obviously follow the money, because that's where you'll get the attention you need. But Abhinav, I'm actually curious, you should be the one also. A young Abhinav comes to you. What's your advice to the entrepreneurs?
Still young.
Younger Abhinav.
But I think from our standpoint, we discussed this quite a bit, right? I think the amount of time and effort it basically took for us to basically do this in healthcare, if you would have put the same kind of effort in any other industries, you would have been 10x the size and scale. It's hard. I think the initial barrier to basically build a software business in healthcare to any significant size and scale is large, right? And what happens is I think you're effectively, if you're working with enterprises, you're serving basically maybe 1,000 customers altogether, right? So that's the universe that you're sort of really selling to. And if the ROI for your solution is not large, the disconnect that we've sort of really seen in a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to approach things is, they are building incredible technology teams and have no context of how the healthcare economics really works. And that divide to a certain extent that healthcare economics is not easy. It's not normal. Who is paying for it? Who is receiving the care? It's all I think so convoluted to a certain extent. So understanding the flow of how healthcare economics works, how the journey sort of really works, and which is the one part of that problem that you can be exceptional at. I think if you really nail that, and for us, I think initially we wanted to build this horizontal platform initially. We went to everyone with the fact that, hey, I think buy the platform. Everyone was like, okay, what is the ROI? Everyone knew that the platform was needed. But if you can't really find, in a 2% margin, basically, I think business, if you can't really find the ROI for that, within the year or maybe at max 24 months, there is no money to be spent on technology that is sort of really theoretically I think the right thing to do, but doesn't really yield you basically ROI in the really, really short term. So I think my general view I think on some of these things is that anyone who's attempting I think problems in healthcare really know I think the life cycle of what how the economic flow of healthcare is basically happening. There is a ton of waste. We talked about the $1 trillion I think waste in healthcare, 5% of the largest GDP in the world. If it was basically just the economic waste that's there, in the US healthcare, if that was a country, it would have been the 11th largest GDP in the world. Just the economic waste in US healthcare, right? So I think there is a bunch of problems to basically I think go solve, but really knowing I think how are you going to create I think very quick ROI in this entire process, and how can you basically have I think the trust and credence and work with partners. I think we've been very grateful to I think our customer partners. Banner has basically been I think one of them. The kind of inputs that we've gotten, you have to be a student. Like a lot of times I feel like I think Silicon Valley has hubris around the fact that we know better. Healthcare is not that space. Like I think like if you can't basically be a good student, you will not really succeed in healthcare. That's like I think a little bit of like I think like my highlight. I can go for an ever like, but I think that was sort of like I think a little bit of my learning in building out a business in that space for sure. So I know like I think like we're a little bit over time. Like I think I'll if we have time for like I think like audience questions. If not, like I think thank you, gentlemen. This was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of the insights.